everyone, I am Deweni Rambukkawella from Faculty of Defence and Strategic Studies at General Sir John Kotelawala Defence University. This is an effort by the students of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the KDU to introduce events of military history. It is narrated by Mr. Chanaka Senanayake. Mr. Senanayake is a retired banker and an avid reader of warfare. Here he comes up with popular narrations from the end of World War I, which ended on 11th of November, 11 o'clock in 1980. World War I, also known as the Great War, began in 1914 after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand of Austria. His murder launched into a war across Europe that lasted until 1918. During the conflict, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, which are the central powers, fought against the Great Britain, France, Russia, Romania, Italy, Japan, and the US, which are the allied powers. Thanks to new military technologies and the horrors of trench warfare, World War I saw unprecedented level of carnage and destruction. By the time the war was over and the Allied powers claimed victory, more than 16 million people, soldiers, civilians alike, were dead. So let's hear more about the World War I from Mr. Senanayake.
Today I am more interested in narrating a few amusing incidents and anecdotes that are related to the end of the World War. And there is a doctor in Sri Lanka, Dr. Philip Veerasingham, who has been specializing in most matters that are outside his field of study. And he begins his book with his tale about the German soldiers marching on to France in 1940s. The German soldiers were marching past the Arc de Triomphe after the surrender of Paris on the 14th of June 1940. The official surrender ceremony of the French army to the German war machine under Hitler took place in an old railway carriage on the 18th of June 1940. This was the same railway carriage where the Germans under the Kaiser surrendered in shame to the Allies more than 20 years earlier. So, this railway carriage was Marshal Ferdinand Foch's this travelling command center. It was said to be a former railway dining car, and it had been commandeered by the French army and converted to this mobile headquarters or the command center of Marshal Foch. He is the one who dictated all the terms of the armistice to the Germans. And most people remark that he has been somewhat rude. It remains to be said, as usual, that the war ended at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. It had meant nothing, solved nothing, and proved nothing, and in doing so had killed more than 8 million men and variously wounded more than 21 million. Out of 8 million others taken prisoner or missing, well over a million were later presumed dead. Thus, the total deaths, not counting civilians, approached 10 million. The moral and mental defects of the leaders of the human race had been demonstrated with some exactitude. One of them, Woodrow Wilson, later admitted that the war had been fought for business interests. Another, David Lloyd George, had told a newspaperman, if people really knew, the war would be stopped tomorrow, but of course they don't and can't know. The correspondents don't write and the censorship wouldn't pass the truth. The thing is horrible and beyond human nature to bear, and I feel I can't go any longer with the bloody business. By midday, silence lay across the battlefields like a blessing. Men climbed out of their rifle pits or shallow ditches, for the elaborate trench systems were miles away to the westward, stood erect in open country with feelings of apprehension and uncomfortable nakedness. I repeat, apprehension and uncomfortable nakedness. They were not used to being exposed. When they are coming out of the trenches, they felt naked because they have never come out of the trenches without being sniped upon by Germans. And then, as the wonder and relief from danger took hold of their minds, they became excited. They formed groups and stared at other groups forming not so far away in space, but until that moment divided from them by hatred and bar of war. Few minutes ago, they were opponents, fighting for two different leaders and several different nations. But with the armistice, now they are about to become friends and to fraternize. Slowly, almost shyly, the groups approached each other, but often they would halt some yards apart while each member of each group scanned the faces of the men opposite, watching for the flash of ferocity which they had learned by precept or experience to associate with the alien uniform. Then some movement or expression by one of them would break the tension and the groups would mingle, shaking hands, talking excitedly in an effort to break the incomprehension, exchanging souvenirs, the British and Americans forcing cigarettes on the Germans, who pathetically had little to offer in exchange. The German stocks and supplies were depleted, whereas the stuff is pouring in from America by the shiploads, and the British and Americans were well stocked. They had well-stocked larders. Wine was produced, and in some places men managed to get drunk together, but not often, for only too soon came the stern, forbidding order against fraternization. By mid-afternoon, an allied picket was posted between the lines along the entire front. After all, something might have happened to wreck the negotiations, and then these men would have to start killing each other again. It would not do for them to become too friendly. Right, now that is the scene at the battlefront. I dealt with the scene, unforgettable scenes that were enacted across the battlefields. People were embracing each other, they were wining and dining, and very soon it was prohibited, strictly prohibited by the official order not to fraternize. Then, let's turn to the cities where the population led dreary lives amid sometimes with lot of privation, fear and anxiety. Also, in the background, the Spanish influenza or the Spanish flu has claimed thousands and thousands in Britain and across Europe. All that was forgotten, and see how the people rejoiced. If silence greeted the end of the war on the battlefronts, the centre of London greeted it with poignant explosion of joy and grief, which grew from nothing to near pandemonium in the time taken by Big Ben to chime the momentous hour. According to Sir Winston Churchill, on the first stroke of the clock, Trafalgar Square and Whitehall were deserted. By the 11th stroke, the whole area was choked with a sea of people dancing, laughing, singing and cheering, while from the office windows above, waste paper, official forms, carbons, dockets and leaflets floated down as the clerks abandoned their desks and flung the symbols of war-straitened economy into the street before flooding down to join the tumult themselves. Now, there was unrestrained rejoicing among the populace. They are getting some sort of relief after so many years of hardships, privations, fear and anxiety. Flags appeared, bells of the city began to peal. From heaven alone knows what dusty shrines were produced, tarnished bugles and hunting horns green with verdigris, and to the accompany of their unmusical blast, augmented by those from taxi cabs and military lorries, crowds swarmed through the park towards Buckingham Palace and sang, "God save the King," until at last he appeared at the balcony and tried ineffectually to speak through the uproar. Nobody heard him, nobody minded, and when at last, after many reappearances to stand, waving to the crowd, acknowledging their royal demonstrations, the royal family disappeared and the tall windows were closed. The crowd still stayed, singing and cheering outside the forecourt. A thin, cold rain fell on them, but no one seems to notice, and when dusk came and the palace lights remained unscreened, all were reminded of other forgotten joys which now they could taste again. When pubs and restaurants opened, crowds packed in, and although food ran out quickly, there was plenty to drink and an apparently unlimited supply of money to pay for it. No one's glass remained empty for long. They were all toasting the victory and the relief. No one's glass remained empty for long. Who paid for the filling was of little concern. As the evening wore on, alcohol enabled many to forget their past losses and even to ignore the almost continual stream of funerals passing along the streets even at this hour, bearing the victims of the latest wave of Spanish influenza. Behind the war, that also ravaged Europe, Spanish influenza. Millions died. And this Mr. Barry Pitt ends up with a punchline which is always repeated anywhere in the world, and I would say pickpockets had the best haul of the century on that particular day.